Autism Quotient test is a set of 50 questions developed by a psychology team in 2001. It is meant to be a means of detecting and evaluating autism. Many people who are diagnosed with autism consult it for a second opinion and use it as a barometer of comparison, while many who have not had an official diagnosis use it to bolster any claim they might have to self-diagnosis. It is quite the piece of garbage, and even though you just recoiled at hearing me say that, I'm going to ask that you stick around so that I can tell you exactly why I'm not wrong. First, let's start with the possible answers. You are given the categories definitely or slightly agree and definitely or slightly disagree. This section in itself is a deception. For all that the scoring cares, you may as well have only agree and disagree, because if you are going to get a point for the question, it won't matter the degree of agreement or disagreement. 50 questions, 50 possible points. Stacked with that is the inapplicability of black and white agreement/disagreement for many of the questions, which I will explain for each question. Such an answer system might work well for an autistic mind that can make snap decisions without deep consideration. Not so for autistics. The stereotypical autistic black and white thinking is not in any way similar to the prevalent autistic black and white thinking. The choices presented do not give enough shades of gray for an autistic to answer accurately, a thing which any autistic would desire. Instead, it only offers the standard autistic on or off switch responses. Moving to question 1. I prefer to do things with others rather than on my own. Concise problems with this question. It is stigmatic and presumptive. What do I mean by that? It is asking if you consciously select to be alone or not. The expected autistic answer is that you do. And again, it does not matter if you answer slightly or definitely. The presumption here is that autistics don't like people, that they would rather not be around them, and that this quality is a major feature of autism. Neither the question nor the answer takes into account the fact that many autistics actually prefer to be with others, or that such a preference might be situationally selected depending on who the others are. I prefer to do things the same way over and over again. It is stigmatic and asks for an opinion. While the question on its face seems fair enough, it relies on the stigma that we are violently unchanging. No account is given to those autistics which I must believe would prefer to find the most efficient, logical/reasonable, most comfortable way of doing a thing, and continue doing it that way, separately for each new thing/situation. And it does not account for obsessive-compulsive behavior, a condition not necessarily possessed by any individual autistic. If I try to imagine something, I find it very easy to create a picture in my mind. You are meant to disagree with this stigmatic question on the presumption that autistics have no visual imagination. Forget Rain Man's dialogue, I see it, when he produced correct numerical answers. For that matter, forget Kim Peek, Rain Man's inspiration, who said the same. Never mind that both aulistics and autistics can have a range from verbal to visual and anything in between of thought processing strategies. This question has exactly the same meaning and intention as question number 8, and I appraise it the same. Other people frequently tell me that what I've said is impolite, even though I think it is polite. The question is presumptive of two factors. One, that autistics are incapable of learning to mirror allistic social norms for their accommodation and comfort, and that allistics are always or even frequently honest about their own discomfort with our directness. Both of these presumptions are in error. Firstly, autism does not isolate us from learning from observation. Quite the opposite, we are often more capable of doing so than our allistic counterparts. Of the second part, it is an obvious and well-known factor that allistics consider it impolite to point out someone else's impoliteness directly to them. I am fascinated by dates. This is a very vague question to which you are meant to agree, as well as stigmatic. It is worth pointing out that not all autistics are Rain Man here. We don't all do well with numbers, and some of us, like myself, cannot handle them easily. That mentioned, to the autistic mind, this question is as vague as they come. Dates. Which ones? The fruits, the social interactions, or the timestamps? To minds that the creators of this questionnaire thought incapable of parsing social communication, this question should be a black hole of cognitive confusion. And it would be if we were. Question 19 and 29 are essentially the same question. I would rather go to a library than to a party. Presumptive and vague. Also the same question as number 24. What is available at the library, museum, party, or theater that we might or might not be interested in? Who else will be there? Are we accompanied or alone? What is the expected atmosphere of each option? You are meant to agree and disagree respectively, but I see too little information to make any determination on either question. I find making up stories easy. Apparently, we are meant to disagree on this point. Why, I could not say. This question is obviously stigmatic. Nothing that I have seen anywhere has ever suggested autistics live their lives without imaginations. Since this question is essentially another version of question 21, to which you are supposed to agree, I will add, nothing that I have seen anywhere has ever suggested autistics cannot enjoy other people's imaginations. I find myself drawn more strongly to people than to things. Yet another very stigmatic question. Let's state the obvious. People are things. And move on to autistics with strong interests in people. They do exist, as do strong interest in people's behavior, strong interest in people's health, and people's interaction, all of which require you to be drawn strongly to people, and all of which are within the range of autistic strong interests. I tend to have very strong interest, which I get upset about if I can't pursue. The first half of this question is perfectly fine. It is the second half that is somewhat behaviorally presumptive. There is nothing in an autistic diagnosis that says we are not capable of learning to adapt or accommodate. This question, however, ties such an inability directly to a valid question about our motivation to have strong interests. Essentially, the same question as number 25. I enjoy social chit-chat. A stigmatic question related to question 15, which I will elaborate as follows. Autistics are capable also of having a strong interest in people's linguistics. When I'm reading a story, I find it difficult to work out the character's intentions. Very presumptive. In fact, not a question about autism at all. Best redirected toward authors of stories, I would think. I am often the last to understand the point of a joke. Stigmatic to the max. Autistics throughout their lives must learn one or more coping methods to deal with the constant pressure placed on us by Aulistics and their societies. Not only do some of us possess very attuned senses of humor as one method of coping, but we can parse a joke down to multiple levels of humor, some of which no Aulistic can imagine. Some of us learn to automatically recognize irony, how to recognize and dispense sarcasm, how to turn words on the pivot of definition, and master complex riddle games. The question, I am often the first one to make a joke, would be as pointless to determine autism, but as obviously possible to any number of autistics. If there is an interruption, I can switch back to what I was doing very quickly. You are intended to disagree with this statement. However, dependent on what was interrupted, it might have been a better question to ask. People often find it difficult to interrupt me when I'm doing something. In most autistic cases, I would believe we would agree with that statement. When I was young, I used to enjoy playing games involving pretending with other children. Also reworded in question 50. There are two parts to this question. Part 1, the presumption that other children allowed you to play with them, didn't make you a butt of their jokes or cruelty when they did allow you to play with them, or that the children you did play with played pretend. Childhood is a notably difficult time for autistics, and that is doubly true when it comes to peer interaction. The second part goes back to what I said for question 14. Autism does not include the lack of imagination as a feature. While it might be true for some that pretend is defined differently, that doesn't mean we can't do it. I find it difficult to imagine what it would be like to be someone else. Representative of the mind blindness stigma fostered by Aulistic misunderstanding about what empathy is. Allow me a moment to clarify. Autistics have empathy, that is, we can, do, and will emulate your pathy. We can't help it, it is beyond our control. What we won't do, but every Aulistic will do while confusing it for empathy, is sympathy, that is, simulate a pathy. One of these is imitative, and the other performative, in that order. What we find difficult, what we would rather avoid, what we most need time away from, is realizing what it is like to be everyone else we encounter. Something far more invasive than simply imagining it. I enjoy social occasions. Another stigma of a question. There is nothing that states anywhere that autistics do not or cannot enjoy social occasions. It is highly presumptive to assume we don't, while also very revealing on why many of us have trouble getting invited to them. The question is also far too broad. What kind of social occasions? With who? For what purpose? It is in fact so general as to not even be a valid question for the purpose of this quiz. I enjoy meeting new people. The reply here is the same as for question 44. What criteria says autistics, of necessity, dislike meeting new people? As explained for question 15, there are very valid autistic reasons to wish to meet new people. I am a good diplomat. Here we have a multifaceted stigma about the lack of the skills it requires to be diplomatic. Diplomacy is a set of skills that must be learned, be you Aulistic or autistic. As such, autistics can be very good diplomats with our attention to detail, penchant for processing data before transmitting data, and ability to emulate pathy. In some regards, we are better diplomatically than our autistic peers. I'm not very good at remembering people's date of birth, a question which is the exact obverse of question 9, and by extension also 19 and 29. This question would have us all as both number files and number blind. You could not agree with both 9 and 49, and yet this is what the answer key expects if you are autistic. Questions 7, 11, 20, 26, 27, 31, 33, 35, 36, 38, 39, and 45 are in essence the same question reworded or rephrased. It is a well-known fact that autistic-allistic interaction is awash with pitfalls and hidden traps. Some of these questions are valid, and I have dealt with some of them individually. But with a full fifth of the screening used to rehash the same point, I have to wonder, is it filler, or is it intended to create a biased result? Questions 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 22, 23, 28, 30, 32, 34, 43, and 46. I consider these questions generally valid and capable of pointing in the direction of autism, because the questions are generally true to the experiences of autistics. Without accounting for repetition, that makes for just under a quarter of the questions asked. Of the remaining questions, we have many references to stigmas the autistic community has repeatedly addressed. Some of the questions are very broad and or vague, and there is heavy use of repetition throughout. It is clear little attention was given to autistic self-reporting or the highly speculative and subjective diagnostic criteria of the psychological model. Some question could and should be raised on the applicability and quality control. My analysis of this quiz is as follows. Under no circumstance should an autistic use this as a means to discover their depth of autism, not as a self-motivated second opinion, and certainly not as a means to self-soothe because at least you're not as bad as 50. Additionally, for the undiagnosed, avoid at all costs. It will not in any way reassure you that you are or are not autistic. Do not use it as a means to inform others that you are autistic. Do not use it for any self-diagnostic purpose whatsoever. The only value in this questionnaire is to measure your current self in your current situation against the current general public stigmas about autism. Period. End of story. I personally have taken it several times and have scored anywhere between 35 and 45 dependent on current circumstances. I called it garbage previously, and I under-exaggerated. It is worse than garbage. It is dangerous to a community who has been stigmatized constantly for over 80 years. I would not even recommend its use to encourage someone to seek a diagnosis.